What would you do if the only thing keeping you safe was a ritual no one else understood? Every night, before the palace fell silent, the queen performed a ritual that no servant dared interrupt, no guard dared to watch. Some said it was nothing more than superstition, the harmless habit of a lonely ruler. Others whispered it was the very reason she had kept her crown through decades of assassins, uprisings, and betrayals. But when the ritual stopped, her fate changed forever. The chest was said to hold everything: love charms from distant deserts, stones carved with forbidden prayers, and a vial of perfume that could bend a man's will. The queen would unlock it with trembling hands, bow her head, and whisper words no one could understand. And then she would place a single object from the chest into the moonlight, as if showing it to the night itself. For years, this ritual guarded her from enemies no one could name. She reigned longer than any expected. But one night, the chest stayed closed. By morning, the palace woke to chaos. Her name was whispered in corridors like a blessing and a curse. Hurrem Sultan, the most powerful woman in the Ottoman Empire's history. But before she became the queen of the night, she was a captive, one of hundreds of women brought to the Sultan's harem from distant lands. Her beauty was undeniable, but beauty alone was dangerous here. In the harem, beauty could make you a target. The harem was more than a palace of luxury. It was a labyrinth of silent wars. Every glance was a test, every word a risk, and every night could be your last if you lost the Sultan's favor. One wrong move, one wrong whisper, and you could be banished, or worse, erased. For women here, survival was not about strength of the sword, but the sharpness of the mind. Hurrem quickly learned the truth. The Sultan's court was a place where loyalty was fragile and friendship could turn into betrayal overnight. Every woman dreamed of being chosen, but once chosen, the real test began, keeping the Sultan's attention. Hurrem knew that beauty faded, but influence could last a lifetime. And so, she sought something no other woman dared to: protection beyond human power. It was said that deep in the queen's private chamber, there was a ritual older than the empire itself, a ritual that bound the throne to its keeper. The women who performed it never lost their place. Hurrem's mentor told her the rules. The ritual must be done after the palace sleeps. The object must be shown to the moon before dawn. And above all, never let the chest stay closed for more than 3 nights. Hurrem embraced the ritual as if her life depended on it, because in the harem, it did. While the Sultan ruled the empire, she ruled the night. And every night, the chest was opened. Inside lay talismans from across the empire, Persian charms, amber beads from the Black Sea, and a vial of oil so rare that even touching it was considered blasphemy. Each item had a purpose: to guard her from betrayal, to soften the Sultan's heart, to keep her name on his lips. And it worked. Hurrem rose higher than any woman before her. She bore the Sultan airs, advised him on politics, and even signed state documents, a privilege no other consort had ever claimed. But in the shadows, her enemies multiplied. The other women hated her for her power. The viziers despised her for her influence over the Sultan. Rumors began to swirl that if she missed a single night's ritual, the throne itself would reject her. And perhaps they weren't wrong, because one night she would miss it, and when she did, the empire would never be the same again. When the sprawling palace of Topkapi sank into silence, when the last echo of a servant's footsteps had faded into the marble corridors, she would rise. Not in her queen's jewels, not in the silks that the court adored, but in a long linen gown, simple, almost ghost-like, as if she were stepping into another life entirely. The ritual began with the bath. In a copper basin, steam curled upward, carrying the delicate scent of rosewater blended with rare herbs, fennel seeds from the Black Sea coast, strands of saffron from Anatolia, and a handful of wild marjoram said to bloom only on moonless nights. This was not merely cleansing the body. It was a baptism of sorts, washing away the day's intrigue, the sly glances, the whispered betrayals. Once her skin glistened with the perfumed water, she would move to the low table where a single brass burner waited. In it, she placed a stick of incense so rare it was traded like gold in the markets of Isfahan, a Persian resin with a scent both sweet and smoky, one that lingered on the air like a memory you couldn't name. As it burned, The smoke would twist and curl, wrapping around her like an invisible veil. Then came the words. Her lips would move silently at first, shaping syllables older than the palace walls themselves. The prayer was a strange marriage, a recitation from the Quran intertwined with the folk incantations of her childhood in the cold Slavic plains. She prayed not to a single god, but to every spirit she thought might be listening, angels, jinn, and the nameless ones her grandmother had warned her about. In the flicker of candlelight, the ritual's most guarded act awaited. She would kneel before the golden chest, small enough to carry, yet heavy with meaning. Inside lay her most dangerous possession, a token tied to the Sultan himself. Some nights it was a lock of his dark hair, wrapped in silk and sealed with beeswax. Other nights, a fragment of the robe he wore the day he ascended the throne. To touch it was to touch the empire's pulse. Her fingers would linger there, feeling the texture, the weight, the history. Then she would whisper the final lines of the prayer, lines no one else in the harem had ever heard. They were not for protection alone, but for permanence, for staying in the Sultan's thoughts, for making her presence impossible to erase. To the guards posted outside her chambers, it was just another quiet night in the Queen's wing. But to her, it was the difference between safety and ruin, between being remembered and being replaced. And though she would never admit it, not to her closest maid, not even to herself, there was a part of her that feared the night she could not complete the ritual, the night when the water, the incense, the prayer, and the relic would remain untouched, because if that night ever came, she knew the palace would feel it, and so would the throne. By the time the whispers began, the ritual had already taken on the shape of legend. In the echoing halls of the Topkapi Palace, where gossip traveled faster than the muezzin's call to prayer, people spoke of one chilling truth. Anyone who touched the objects used in the Queen's midnight ceremony would be dead within 3 days. No one knew if the curse was real or if it was simply the Queen's most cunning defense. But then there was the story of the handmaiden. She was young, curious, and foolish enough to believe that the Queen's power came only from beauty and wit. One night, while cleaning the royal chamber, she found herself alone with the golden chest. The candlelight shimmered on its surface, like sunlight trapped in metal. They say she hesitated. They say she even looked over her shoulder, certain someone was watching. But temptation won. She touched it, just for a second. By morning, she was gone. No one saw her leave. No body was found. The palace guard swore she had not stepped past the gates. To this day, her name is never spoken aloud in the Queen's wing. And then there were the other women, the ones who tried to imitate her. In a place like the harem, where beauty was abundant but time at the top was short, desperation could turn even the most regal woman into a mimic. A Georgian concubine once tried to recreate the ritual exactly as she had heard it. The rosewater bath, the Persian incense, even a fake lock of hair, she bribed a guard to steal from the royal barber. She was dismissed from the palace within the week. A Circassian beauty, famed for her voice, attempted her own version, adding charms and prayers from her homeland. The Sultan never summoned her again. Within months, she was married off to a provincial governor and vanished from Istanbul's glittering world entirely. The conclusion, whispered in the corridors, was clear. You could copy the motions, but not the magic. That was the thing about the Queen's ritual. No one knew exactly where its power came from. Some claimed it was divine favor, a blessing placed upon her by holy women before she entered the palace. Others swore it was older, darker, rooted in Slavic folk magic, where spirits and saints sat side by side on the same altar. And yet, the most dangerous rumor was the simplest one, that the Sultan himself was bound by it, that somewhere, in the smoke of her incense and the lilt of her secret prayer, his loyalty was sealed, not by duty, not by love, but by something he could not explain or resist. Years passed, and still he never abandoned her. Queens before her had been adored, then forgotten, replaced. But not her. Not once. Not even when younger women with brighter eyes and softer skin arrived. She remained. To the outside world, this was a love story. But within the walls of the palace, it was understood for what it truly was. A reign built on ritual. A power so potent that even the Sultan, ruler of an empire stretching from the Balkans to Arabia, could not, or would not break it, and so the golden chest remained. The rose water was replenished, the incense imported, the word spoken, night after night after night, because in the Ottoman harem, beauty might win you an audience, but magic kept you the throne. It began quietly. The palace did not notice at first. After all, the queen's midnight ritual was not something anyone dared to watch openly. But for those who had worked near her chambers for years, there was a subtle shift in the air. The faint fragrance of rose water that used to drift through the corridor every night, gone. The low crackle of incense burning behind closed doors, silent. Some say she had fallen ill, a fever that left her too weak to stand for the hours her ritual required. Others whispered that she had been warned by someone she trusted, that continuing the ceremony would bring her ruin. And then there were the more dangerous rumors, that the golden chest had been tampered with, its power broken. Whatever the reason, the ritual stopped. At first, nothing happened. The Sultan still visited her. She still sat beside him during feasts, her jeweled hand resting lightly on his arm. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the balance of the palace began to shift. The younger concubines, those with bright eyes and calculated smiles, grew bolder. They lingered longer in the Sultan's chambers, whispered louder in the gardens. Ministers who had once bowed deeply to her began seeking audiences with others. And then came the incidents. A letter intercepted here, a favor denied there. Small betrayals, strung together like beads on a necklace, until they formed something much larger, a network of rivals. Within weeks, her allies found themselves cornered. A loyal eunuch was reassigned to distant duties. A trusted maid was dismissed on accusations no one could prove. Every day, the queen's circle grew smaller. In the corridors, the whispers returned, but this time, they carried a different tone. She has lost her hold. The Sultan listens to another now. It was never her beauty. It was the ritual. She tried to recover her footing. Perhaps she even considered returning to the ceremony. But those who believe in such things will tell you, once a ritual is broken, its power is never the same. And besides, the chest remained closed. The final blow came during a grand banquet. The Sultan, in front of the court, chose another woman to pour his wine. It was a gesture so small, so ordinary, that an outsider would have missed its meaning entirely. But to those who lived within the harem, it was a declaration. She smiled, of course. She always smiled. But those who knew her well saw the flicker in her eyes, the understanding that something, perhaps everything, had shifted beyond her control. And so the queen, who had once been untouchable, now stood on unsteady ground. All because a ritual stopped. But here's the question that still hangs over the marble halls of Topkapi. Was it just a coincidence? Or had her throne always rested, not on love, not on politics, but on the quiet power of those midnight hours, the smoke, the rosewater, and the whispered words no one else dared speak? History is full of mysteries. Some are solved, some are buried forever. But the story you've just heard still echoes through the halls of time. If you want to step deeper into the shadows of the past, follow the trail with us. There are many more secrets waiting, and you won't want to miss the next one.